Now that it is late summer on the homestead, we decided to go ahead and bring in our final harvest of a lot of our crops. We're starting off with our peppers, we're going to be bringing in our tomatoes, our Swiss chard, okra, turnips, all of those wonderful veggies, and we want to take you along with that today. So bringing in this final harvest means that we're going to need to be preserving a lot of this because obviously we cannot eat all of this right away before it would spoil. So I want to bring you along today as we are harvesting, going ahead and amending our raised beds a little bit, and turning some of this harvest into tomato sauce, freezing some of our peppers for use year round, and I just want you to come along with us for that and see the process. It can be a little bit tricky when you're still trying to work regular jobs and maintaining a homestead, and please don't judge our tomato bed here. I'm sure you can totally see that the weeds have absolutely gotten away from us in the last few weeks. We were surprised that we had such issues with weeds in our raised beds. It didn't shock us at all in the main garden, but in the raised beds we thought it would be a little better, but here in the last few weeks this has turned into a weed bed, not a tomato bed. So we are needing to sort through weeds and tomato leaves to get those final tomatoes in. But we did still get quite a few tomatoes, even if we did have to sort through to find them. Also during this process today, we're really wanting to get a jump start on our spring planting by going ahead and doing some amending and getting these beds prepared in the fall. That's really great whenever you have a chance to do something ahead of time like that. It is going to be so much better come the next gardening season. We definitely found that out when we were trying to get our garden in this summer. Really this spring, it ended up more like a summer garden, even though it should have been a late spring garden, but it just took a lot of time to get things ready to go. So we want to do as much of that this late summer as we can to prepare for our spring garden next year. So we're starting by getting these beds sorted through and getting the weeds in a pile and getting the foliage from a lot of our plants in separate piles. We're going to be using that as kind of like a green mulch in a way, but we are going to just throw it in our compost for now, let it break down a little bit, but then we are going to be putting it back into our garden as a little bit of organic matter and see what that does. We've definitely found this first year homesteading is a journey. If anybody is on this journey right now, I'm sure you can definitely testify to that. We've made some mistakes, we've definitely found some things that work, but there's just a lot of trial and error, especially when time is limited. You know, you can research, and research is great, but sometimes you just need to try it. That's kind of what I would encourage you all to do. If you are wanting to get your feet wet with homesteading, go ahead and just try it. You know, don't dump a lot of money into it if you don't know it's going to work, but give some things a try and just see what works for you, see what doesn't. For example, this spring we brought in some soil because our soil around here is not great. It is very rocky, it's very dense, very clay-like. So we brought in some soil to put in our raised beds. And it's great soil, it's very, very rich, but at the same time, it is very loose. So none of our plants really were able to take a really strong root hold because this soil is so loose. So anyway, we are going to be trying something new where we're going to add in a little bit of our own soil, to add in a little bit of clay, as well as a lot of organic matter like this grass clippings that we have composted a little bit, and see what happens there. Our garden still gave us a nice harvest this year. We're thankful for that, but it definitely could have been better. So coming into next spring, we're just going to be trying some new things and seeing what works and taking you all along for that journey. So it is the next day, or maybe the day after at this point, and I definitely need to be doing something with these tomatoes by now. Tomatoes are not going to last long until they are ripe and ready for you to do something with them. So I definitely need to be doing that. I already had a couple that were kind of going bad on me, so I need to deal with these tomatoes. So I'm going to be making some spaghetti sauce. And I know I already showed on here that I did tomato juice, and I love doing tomato juice with my tomato harvests, but I just wanted to do something different here. So I'm making tomato sauce, and I just started by washing those tomatoes really thoroughly. I'm cutting off any of the bad spots, and I'm just adding them to a really big stock pot in quarters, halves, whatever. I had quite a few little tomatoes, but if you have bigger tomatoes, you're not going to need this many individual. I would say if you have medium-sized tomatoes, go for about 10 tomatoes for this recipe. That would be plenty. And then I'm going to be adding in 2 medium-sized bell peppers from the garden, as well as 2 medium mild banana peppers. Our banana peppers really weren't hot this year, so I was totally fine to add those in, and I wasn't worried about the sauce being too spicy. But I did just want a little extra flavor, so I added in 2 of those banana peppers, as well as 1 medium onion, which unfortunately did not come from our garden this year. I'm hoping to get onions in next year, but that's okay. And then I also added in 6 cloves of garlic. And I just put that all down in that big stock pot. We're going to be simmering this until everything is really soft and can be blended into a nice tomato sauce. So just chunk those veggies up, add them to that stock pot, and then put in about a cup of water. You just want a little bit of liquid to help this start to simmer and not let anything scorch on the bottom of your pot. At this point, I am just going to place that stock pot on the stove over low heat. You don't want this to be too high. And then I'm just going to let this simmer on the stove for about 2 hours until everything is really soft. After those 2 hours, as you can see here, I'm going in with an immersion blender, and I'm just blending this until this is a nice, smooth sauce. If you don't have an immersion blender, you can definitely still do this recipe. You just need to run this all through a regular blender and then just transfer it back to your stock pot. But after I have that all blended and smooth, I am adding in 1 can of tomato paste. This is kind of optional depending on the flavor that you want in your sauce. I wanted to bring back a little bit stronger of a tomato flavor, so that's why I opted for the tomato paste. Plus, I wanted to go ahead and make this a little thicker without having to simmer it and lose some of the volume of my sauce for several more hours. So anyway, I added in that tomato paste and whisked it in really well, and then I'm adding in some pepper to taste, 2 teaspoons of salt, and then I'm going to be going in with some of my fresh herbs. Now, you don't need to have fresh herbs for this either. You can definitely use dried herbs, but if you are going to opt for the dry herbs, you'll want to use half the amount as what I'm going to tell you for the fresh herbs. Okay, so the herb blend that I decided to use for this sauce was basil, parsley, and oregano. And I just grabbed a handful from the herb garden, which is definitely still going strong. They appreciate the cold weather, I am finding. And I'm just going to finely chop those. I want these to be chopped pretty fine because I don't want any big pieces of herbs in my sauce. And then I'm going to be using 1 tablespoon each of these herbs, just adding that right into the sauce and stirring all that together. And finally, I'm going to add in 1/4 cup of grated Parmesan cheese and a few dashes of red pepper flakes. Those are optional, just depends on if you want a little bit of heat in your sauce. Then I'm going to stir all that together and let it simmer for 1 more hour just to let all of those flavors combine really well. This sauce works really great over any kind of pasta or in a lasagna. You could even use this as a pizza sauce or a marinara sauce, or even over like a meatball hoagie with some mozzarella cheese melted over it. Any of those options would be delicious with this sauce. So I hope you guys decide to give this a try with some of your final garden harvest. Anyway, moving on to all of those peppers that we brought in. I need to get these taken care of as well. And my favorite way to preserve my pepper harvest for year-round use is just by freezing. It is so simple. Literally only takes the amount of time that it takes you to chop the peppers up. And they are perfect to pull out of the freezer and throw into a soup or a stew or really any kind of dish that is going to be cooked. Now, you are not going to be able to pull these out of the freezer and use them in place of fresh peppers, but if your dish is going to be cooked, they are going to work really just as well as a fresh pepper, because they really don't lose a lot of their normal texture when they go into the freezer. So all I'm doing is just cutting the tops off of my peppers, taking all of those seeds and flesh out of the middle, and then I'm just chopping these to whatever size I want. I just cut them into some chunks, and then I'm just going to put them into a gallon-sized freezer bag and just put them straight into the freezer. That's all there is to this, and your peppers are preserved for year-round use. This is seriously the best method. So easy, so simple, and you can pull them out of the freezer whenever you need. Put them on top of a pizza, put them in a casserole, put them in a soup or a stew, and they are going to have just as delicious of that pepper flavor as they would have if you had fresh peppers. So I'm just going to get started on this massive pile of peppers and catch up with y'all in a minute. Well, I hope you all enjoyed following along with us as we brought in our final harvest and did some preparation for our spring garden, as well as turned some of these vegetables into some usable products that we can use throughout the winter. Thank you all so much for stopping by our homestead again. We appreciate it so much when you comment and like, and if you would even decide to permanently follow along with our journey and subscribe, we would be so very appreciative. Well, until next week, friends, I hope you all have a lovely weekend, and I will see you all then. Goodbye.